Welcome back to another episode of on my channel, and this is going to be a character ranking along with a killer ranking. This is and they're both going to be and they're all in a trilogy on Netflix, a horror trilogy on Netflix called Fear Street. So there are some lists on that. There is a list here that I've got up here on Netflix on a website called BuzzFeed, and they here have counted down the killers of the franchise. Now, what Fear Street is mainly known for is the many variety of characters, not just the many variety of characters that fight against the killers, but a variety of killers. And this website ranks the killers from Fear Street. I'm ranking all the characters, not just the villains, but I'll go through each of these on here and I'll tell you if they're in the list. So in 14th they've got Sarah Fear, who will be on this list. In 13th they've got Nurse Lane, she will also be on this list. We've also got Sam Fraser, who's one of the main characters. She's not really a villain, but she'll be on this list. We've got the Humpty Dumpty Killer, will not be on this list. Because he's one of the killers that don't appear in the franchise, that don't appear in any of the films. We've got the Grifter, who drowned one of his victims, as you can see there. We have this guy called Billy Barker, who took a baseball bat to bash his brothers to death. We've got one of the guys from part 3, who I will be ranking, called Caleb. We've got one of the most substantial villains in the franchise, Ruby Lane. She killed a bunch of her friends before killing herself. And the makeup for all these guys is Skull Mask is the most recent killer because of the shady side / good curse, which I'll talk to you about later when I talk about one of the characters called Nick Good. We have the Milkman Harry Rooker. This guy targeted housewives. We have the first ever shady side killer, Cyrus Miller. He's a pastor, he will also be on this list. So will the Milkman, and so will Skull Mask. We also have the Camp Nightwing killer, Tommy Slater. He's the only killer to actually have a movie based on his killing spree. We find out about the Grifter's killing spree, the Billy Barker's killing spree, Ruby Lane's killing spree, Skull Mask's killing spree, and Cyrus Smith in the thing. Cyrus Miller's murder does get included in the 6 and 6 version of part of part 3. But other than him, the Camp Nightwing Killer is the only one to actually get a movie based on following his he's the only killer to get his killing spree to film. This guy is a part of the Good family, but and who. And we've got this guy as well. So everyone, Nick Good will be in this list, Simon Good will be in this list, Nightwing Killer will be in this list, Cyrus Miller, the Milkman, Skullmask, Ruby Lane, Caleb, Billy Barker, the Grifter, Sam, Nurse Lane, and Sarah Fair will all be in this list. The only killer, the only you'd call Shades, the only killer and this character of Nurse Lane is the same character from part 1, and she's the daughter of Ruby Lane. But yeah, everyone on this list, apart from the Humpty Dumpty Killer, will be in this list. I will get more into these killers when I get to their rankings. Okay, speaking of, the next list on the next video will be counting down the top deaths, the best. We'll be ranking down the deaths in Fear Street. You can see on the top left hand corner, right here, there's a girl with cake on her face next to the Skullmask Killer. You will find out what that is about in the killing list. Hint: it's not good. It's gross, but you have to wait. But also, before I do, I'm also going to check Screen Rant's ranking of their top 10 favourite characters, of their top 10 best characters, of the top 10 best characters according to them. In 10th we have Simon, who will be in this list. We have in 9th we have Martin, who's not substantial in part 1 but substantial in part 3. We have in 8th Nick Good, who you'll find out what he's about in the list, later on in this list. In 7th we have one of the main characters, a lot like Simon of the first film, Sam. In 8th we have the girl that I showed you with the cake on her face, Kate, played by newcomer Julia Raveout, this part 1 was her first ever theatrical, first ever film. It was her film debut. In 5th we have the main plot, the person that's involved with the main plot, Sarah Fear, obviously, in 5th. In 4th we've got one of the people that's from part 2 will be talked later on in this, Cindy. In 3rd we've got the main girl, we've got the main character, Dina. In 2nd we've got another person, we've got the sister of Cindy, Ziggy. But easily in 1st is everyone's favourite nerd, Josh, who will be talked about later on this list. So now with that, we are going to get into the character rankings. Now, here is character rankings. There is 47 kills to go through. These first kills are not big. These first kills have nothing separating them. They're in this 47 to 37 period where I can't decide which one's better, which character's better and all. They're just as good as each other, and I can't split them apart in any way possible. First up, we have a character called Rod. And these guys will be also on the killing list. So Rod, Jess, Sean, Jeremy. So we got Rod in 47, 46 Jesse, 45 Sean, 44 Jeremy, 43 Kurt, 42 Stacey, 41 Sheila, 40 Joan, 39 Grace Miller, 38 Mrs. Fraser, and 37 The Widow. These guys are not at all separated at all. They're all these characters don't have much screen time. That's why they're low on this list. Rod's, Jess, Stacey, Jeremy, Kurt's. Rod, Jess, Sean, and Jeremy are campers from Shadyside. Kurt is one of the camp counselors from Sunnyvale. He's a crazy guy. We have Stacey, who's another camper from Shadyside. We have Sheila, who's a camper, who's one of the campers of Sunnyvale, also the tormentor of main character Ziggy from part 2. We have Joan, who's another camp character from Shady Side. We have Grace Miller, is Hannah from part 3's mum. Hannah Miller from part 3's mum. Not substantial, but still. And we've got another character, another mum. We've got Sam Fraser's mum, Mrs. Fraser. Mrs. Fraser and Grace Miller are both played by the same actress. And then the widow is a small character in part 3 that not much screen time, but was enough to get. So that's why these guys that I just mentioned don't have enough screen time to be good, but they have enough screen time to not be considered better than each other. None of them have more. Some of them have more screen time than others, but that doesn't mean that they're better characters. Next up is going to be in 36th. Lowdown is going to be Ruby Lane's mum, Mary Lane. Now she doesn't have the she's not the most substantial character in this franchise, but she is a really good character. She lost her daughter, and you can tell losing your daughter to some sort of shit curse is a bad thing, especially when they're just harmless people. The Shady Siders that are cursed are harmless people that are cursed and become killers. They're not actual killers. They're just normal people from Shady Side who get cursed by the devil and go on these killing sprees. In 35th, we have the character of the boyfriend of one of our characters, Alice, from part 2. He is also the first victim in Tommy Slater / the Nightwing Killer's murder spree. Big murder spree at Camp Nightwing. Not the most substantial character. He did get. You find out how he got killed later on when we're at the kills, but not the biggest character in the franchise, but was still very interesting. Next up, we have Heather. She was played by Stranger Things actress Maya Hawke. She is just a normal girl who works in the Shady Side Mall. She has this friend called Ryan Torres who ends up getting cursed by the devil, and he goes on a murder spree. He goes on a mall murder spree, and the final kill is he finally goes on killing Heather before he kills himself. Next up, we've got two cats. We've got two of the killers. Nothing separates these two. We have the Grifter and Billy Barker. Not much. We saw one scene where they were killing one person, and they also were in the final in some of the final battles, in the final battles of the second and third films. Well, the Billy Barker was in the second and third final battles, but the Grifter was only in the third film's final battle. Next up, we have the person who started it all, Solomon Good. What annoys me about Solomon Good is he's evil, and obviously he's good. He's a good, but he's evil. That's one of the twists, that the goods are evil, which is a good twist. Not given, it's strange that a character would have the second name Good, and now we know it was to reveal a big secret that the goods are actually evil, whereas Seraphir is actually actually innocent. We'll talk about her later on. Now, next up, we have characters that are none of the characters that are better than each other. We have a character called Caleb. We have a character called Henry in 29th, and we have a character called Constance in 28th. Constance and Henry get killed off very early in the film, in part 3, and they're played by Benji Forrest Jr., who played Josh, who played Josh, and Constance, played by Sadie Sink, who's from Stranger Things, who's Matt from Stranger Things, but also Cindy from part 2, we'll get to later on in the list. Next up, we have the mayor of Sunnyvale, Will Good, the brother of main villain Nick Good. In 5th, we have a character played by McCabe Sly, who played Tommy Slater / the Nightwing Killer in part 2. substantial, but not too substantial. Next up, we have the most recent Shadyside murderer, Ryan Torres, who, like I said, slaughtered 7 people in the Shadyside Mall, including Heather. Next up, we have the friend group of Sarah Fear, Abigail, played by Emily Rudd, who played Cindy from part 2, and we have, because Cindy died in part 2, and the actress that played her, Emily Rudd, was brought back to play a character called Abigail. That's the same with Isaac, played by Fred Heschinger, and Lizzie, played by Julie Wayvout. Julie Wayvout played Kate, Fred Heschinger played Simon. They both died in part 1, and then the third film was filmed before the second, and filmed after the first and before the second, because a lot of the actors from part 1 and part 2 were in part 3. Sadie Sink, Emily Rudd, Jeremy Ford, Kiana Madeira, Benji Flores Jr., Olivia Scott Welch, Julie Wayvout, Ashley Zuckerman, who played Nick Good. We have lots of the actors from part 1 and part 2 were also in part 3. That's why part 3 was filmed before part 2, because a lot of the characters from part 1 were in part 3, so they had to film part 3 after part 1, and then they filmed part 2. Next up, we have our next killer, Harry the Milkman Rooker. Like I said, he killed housewives a while back, and he's a very cool killer. Probably the best makeup of one of the killers, if I'm being honest, other than Ruby Lane. I feel like his makeup, his face was very interesting. I do really want to show you his face, the actual character, because you don't have a very good view of him. Just got to find a good picture. Here you go. It's a blurry picture, but that's him right there. That is good face makeup. So he's a killer. He used to be a milkman before he was cursed, and he killed many housewives. So there you go. That's a better view of the character and a good view of the there you go. That's a better look at him. He's very cool. He's a very cool looking killer. Like I said, he killed a lot of housewives. So yeah, he's a really good killer. The makeup is he's a good villain. He has a good backstory. Him being a milkman and him just being a normal milkman before he was cursed was really cool. In 20th, we have best friend of Cindy, Alice, played well by an actress called Ryan Simpkin. She gets killed off. She also gets killed off in part 2. Later on, her kill in the kill ranking. Not many scenes, but still an interesting character. In 19th, we have Gary. He's another camper. He's another camp counselor or camper. He's another camp counselor or camper. I don't know which one he is. I don't know if it's camp counselor or a camper. But he's another person. He's another person that gets killed. He's another person from part 2 that gets killed off because he's part Shadyside. As you'll know, all the characters on this list were Shadyside. Most of the characters on the kill list are Shadysiders. There are a few Sunnyvalers on this list that were killed, but other than that, it's mainly Sunnyvale characters, Shadyside characters. In 18th, we have Peter, who Sam dates after breaking up with Dina, after breaking up with the main character Dina. He's in 18th. Speaking of Sam, we have Sam was played by Olivia Scott Welch, and Olivia Scott Welch also played the love interest of Sarah Fear, Hannah Miller. I talked about her later on. She was one of the her, along with Fairfair, are accused of being witches and bringing the devil to Union, the place that would then become Shadyside and Sunnyvale. And basically, she's a good character. Olivia Scott Welch does a great performance as this character. That's very limited to hang out with Sarah Fear because her mum absolutely despises Sarah Fear, so she's in 17th. Now there's double the characters on this list. We have Nick Good twice and we have Ziggy twice. We have in 16th we have the Nick Good, played by in 16th we have the young version of Nick Good, played by Ted Sutherland. Had a nice romance with Ziggy. He's one of the biggest camp counselors. He later becomes a police officer, and he's just a good character. His scenes with Ziggy and Sadie Sink are very good. Sadie Sink and Ziggy are very good, and he's just a cool character. Next up, we have another character that's going to be split into two. We're going to have Tommy and Cursed Tommy. So we're going to have Tommy before he was cursed, and Tommy when he was cursed. In 15th, we have Tommy before he was cursed. Obviously, not many scenes, so that's why he's not higher up. But he felt like a great boyfriend to Cindy. He was killed off. He was cursed unfairly, but that's what the Goods do. They curse random Sadiesiders, and they don't care if they're innocent, if they don't deserve it or not. Next up, we have the person which the main storyline evolves around is Sarah Fear. We learn a lot about her in part 1 and part 2, and then in part 3, in the first part of part 3, we find out that she's innocent and Nick Good's evil. In fact, we find out that she's not a witch and that Nick Good is the one and that she wasn't the one who started the curse, but Nick Good was obviously the one who started the curse. And she's just a nice character. She was hung. That'll be later on this list. I'll tell you where it is. And she's just a memorable character. Next up, we have the main character along with Ziggy, the girlfriend of Tommy Slater, and the best friend of Alice. We have Cindy, played very well by Emily Rudd. Apart from Ziggy and the Nightwing Killer, she's the best character from apart from Ziggy and the Nightwing Killer, Cindy's the third best character from part 2. Next up we have Brian Torres, and also aka known as Skullmask. Skullmask takes part in one of the best deaths in this franchise, and you can probably tell which one it is because I showed you earlier on in this episode what that one is, but you don't know exactly how Kate was killed, and you'll find out in the next video. Next up we have Nick Good. Skullmask, by the way, wasn't too iconic, wasn't too interesting. He had a couple of scenes, but he was a fun killer. Next up we have Nick Good, who we find out is evil. This Nick Good is the Nick Good that I'm talking about. The Nick Good in the 11th I'm talking about right now is the older version, the police officer version of Nick Good, played by Ashley Zuckerman, who also played Solomon Good, who was obviously on this list earlier. Now, Nick Good ends up being the main villain, and that we find out that Dina, Josh, Ziggy, and Cindy Josh, Dina, Ziggy, and Martin have to kill Nick Good to end the curse. And his plot lines are good. He has a couple of scenes with Martin which are very memorable. The twist is pulled off very well. He's not really the most satisfying villain, but Fear Street did the best they could with a villain that is who is not two-way, but he's still third. He is still the third. He is still one of the best characters. He is still just outside the top 10. He could get in the top 10, but I feel like the people in the top 10 are just better. Next up, we have the character played by Sadie Sink. we have a younger version of Ziggy, played by Sadie Sink from part 2, and she's good. And like I said, her scenes with Nick Good, her scenes with Ted Sutherland's Nick Good are great. Next up we have the main killer of part 2, Nightwing. Nightwing is the second best Shadyside killer in my opinion. So many memorable kills. There will be, he also killed himself. Those will be on this list, and you will find out who he killed, how he killed them, and how he was actually killed, and who he was killed by. Who he was killed by and how he was killed. In 8th, we're going to have, obviously, Nightwing is also Tommy, but I've decided to rank Tommy and Nightwing as 2 separate characters, because Tommy had some scenes before he became the Nightwing killer, so I'm going to count them as 2 different characters. The same, next up is going to be someone who wasn't in part 1 much, but he's in part 2. He is in the main battle. He is in part 3 a bit, and this is the character of Martin. Memorable. He's played by an actor called I don't know. I think he's played by. I think he's played by an actor called. He's played by an actor called Darryl Britt Gibson, and he's a memorable character. That's why he's so high up. In 7th, we're going to have adult Ziggy, also known as Christine Berman. Now, usually when you heard her name, Christine, when you heard the first initial of her name, C. Berman, and you watched part 2, you were thinking, C. Berman is Cindy. It turns out that C. Berman is actually Ziggy, and that Nick Good, that she was revived by Nick Good. He used chest compressions and mouth-to-mouth CPR, chest compressions mouth-to-mouth to revive her back. And when he grew up, and Nick Good gave her this new name, Christine. So yeah, you watch part 1, you see that the survivor of the Camp Nightwing killer, one of the survivors of the Camp Nightwing killer is C. Berman, and you're thinking, when you watch part 2, you're like, C. Berman is Cindy, but C. Berman is actually Ziggy, not Cindy. Cindy actually dies at the end of part 2, whereas Ziggy dies, but then is brought back to life by Nick Good, and that's where the name Christine came from. Nick Good decided to name her Christine after everything that happened. In 6th, we have our final girl, the main character, Dina, played well by Kiana Madeira. The reason why she's so low is she's not memorable. She's when Kate kissed Simon, she had no reaction whatsoever. The scenes with her brother Josh were great, but still a weak character. Not really a main character that I like. She's probably one of the weakest. She's probably the weakest main character she's probably one of the weakest main characters in all of horror. Just because I didn't like her that much. That's why she's not even in the. That's why she's out of the top 5. Finally, we get to our final Shadyside killer, Ruby Lane. What interests me, Ruby Lane, is so much is her backstory. Her kill. She's just a normal girl who's possessed by the devil. She then she then uses a razor blade to kill her friends, and then she kills herself. And her mum is so distraught over finding out that her daughter's died that everything changes in her life. That's why Ruby Lane is so hard. Next up is going to be Sam, our love interest for Dina. Sam is a very good character. I don't have any complaints about her, and just memorable. In 3, we have the comic relief of part 1, Simon, who was sadly killed, even though he didn't deserve it. But other than that, every scene he was in, especially the scenes he was in with Kate, were great. He also reacted weirdly to when he found out that Kate and Simon and Kate and Josh and then that Dino and Sam went to Pound and Pound. And by the way, Pound Town, you can probably tell what Pound Town is. It's sex. Is what Pound Town is. What Simon means by Pound Town. And we're in the top 2. And as you've been remembering, there's 2 characters that I've mentioned in this video that I just haven't got to ranking. And that is Josh and Kate. But who is first and who is second? In second out of those 2 is going to be Kate. I agree with Screener. I feel like Josh is the better character. Is the best character in Trilogy. He's a geek. He has moments with Kate, and he has a kiss with Kate. He also has this weird scene with Kate. It's a sex scene. I don't know if they had sex or not, but it was a weird scene. It was cut alongside a sex scene that was happening between Dina and Sam. This is supposed to be aimed for teenagers, but I don't really think sex is a teenager style. I don't really think sex is mature. Well, it is mature enough for teenagers, but I feel like if you're aiming a horror franchise about, it's just a really common horror movie trope, and it gets annoying every time. We don't always want sex scenes. Yes, they're fun to watch, but they're just too repetitive. That's one of the horror movie tropes that not even me, I think, not even me could get past. It's just so repetitive. You have sex scene. Lots of horror movies have sex scene after sex scene after sex scene. It's just too repetitive. Just stop with these sex scenes in horror films. But continuing on, in second is going to be Kate. Kate is one of the most memorable deaths in the franchise. You'll see later on how she's killed. You obviously saw a picture of the scene before she was killed, but you probably don't know how she was killed. But her scenes with Josh, great. Her scenes with Simon, great. Her scenes with Dina, her scenes with Sam, great. And she had some badass moments. But in second is Simon. In first is Josh, for one reason and one reason only. He is the best character, played well by Benji Flores Jr. There's nothing else to say like that. And also, very good like I said, very good scenes with Kate, very good scenes with Simon. Simon and him had a little bit of a bromance going on. And the looks of their faces when they saw that Kate had been killed. Like I said, I keep mentioning about Kate being killed and it being one of the best kills of all horror, and you'll see why later on in the next video. Why is Josh such a great character? The performance of Benji Flores Jr. is flawless. He's a sincere actor. He's a Nickelodeon star, having played Triple G in the Nickelodeon show Game Shakers, and he's just a memorable character. He also is a bit of a bromance going on with Simon. He has good scenes with Martin in part 3. He has a badass scene where he kicks and where he literally says, Martin asks him and says, any tips for fighting these guys? Then there's a flashback back to part 1 where we see Kate's death yet again. I keep mentioning about it, but you'll see why. And then it comes back to Josh and Martin in front of Sam, who's now possessed, and he says, just try not to die, and then he goes, click. He literally is like badass. Like when you load a shotgun, he made the same sound that you do when you load a shotgun, but instead of it being him getting a shotgun ready, it's him getting a water gun ready, which was such a badass scene. Like I said, his scenes with Kate are amazing. He's just a scene stealer, really. And that's going to be it for this character ranking of the 47 Fear Street characters that I've included. Subscribe to my channel, click the notification bell, put in the comment section your favourite character. But until next time, I am out, and have a nice day. Peace.